the night the neighbor couple was killed. I saved their only son who was trying to commit suicide. Later, he viciously grabbed my waist and bit my ear bone while murmuring, "So, my soft-hearted sister. Do you think how did they die?" During the summer vacation of my sophomore year, when I was coming home with my suitcase, a neighbor couple was lying in a pool of blood. The police had set up a cordon, and their only son, she, was leaning against the wall at this moment. The teenager was thin and had a sickly pallor on his raised face. He glanced at me and then looked away. Unconsciously, I felt a bit of heartache, because I knew that she had been lost outside since childhood, and was only found by the neighbor couple at the beginning of the year. He was only 17 years old, and hadn't enjoyed half a year of family affection yet. I put down my suitcase and came in front of him, wanting to rub his hair to give him a little comfort. But before my hand could touch the top of his head, I was startled by the look in his eyes. His eyes were like a stagnant pool, as if unable to stir up any waves. I felt a bit of heartache. I shifted my steps and then reached out and hugged him in my arms, comforting him softly. "Don't be afraid. Sister will protect you from now on." I thought he would viciously push me away, and then say some harsh words. But he didn't. The teenager in my arms was more obedient than expected. He quietly pressed his face against my chest and said nothing. After giving my statement, I took she into my house. Coincidentally, my parents were working in other places. I was also bored being alone. She on the sofa looked very quiet, with his head down. I couldn't see what he was thinking, until the sound of hunger came. I withdrew my gaze with a smile. "Are you hungry? Sister will make noodles for you." I opened the refrigerator. There were 2 eggs. That was enough. I fried the eggs in the pan. She's voice came from behind me. "Why?" This was the first sentence she took the initiative to say to me. Clearly a 17-year-old kid. But his tone was cold. "What, why?" I put the cooked noodles in front of him, and put both fried eggs in his bowl. "You are too thin. You need to eat more. You know? Also." "What, why?" I sat opposite she and slurped the noodles in my bowl without any grace. The teenager in front of me fell silent again. His gaze swept over to my side, and then he stiffly picked up a noodle and took a bite. I snorted in my heart. Little brat. Pretending to be delicate when eating. After dinner, I found my dad's clothes, and threw them to she. He couldn't go back to his home for now. He could sleep on my sofa at night. When she came out of the shower, I was sitting on the sofa chewing potato chips. At over 1.70 meters in height, he didn't seem to have any flesh on his body at all. The loose shirt was like being put on a clothes hanger. At this time, she was barefoot, with wet hair. The hem of his shirt covered down to just below his thigh. He stood obediently at the bathroom door, wanting to move but not daring to. After a long time, he uttered a sentence. "You didn't bring pants for me, right?" I quickly put down the potato chips and went to the closet to rummage out a pair of shorts. "Here, put them on." While waiting for she to put them on, I took out a hairdryer and then laid him to the sofa. He knew what I was going to do and held out his hand to me. "I'll do it myself." I slapped his hand away to satisfied lie. "Don't move." Although this kid didn't say it explicitly, but I could see that he was pretending to be strong. After all, the death of parents was a fatal pain for anyone. Although he had only been home for less than half a year. If I helped him more, maybe he could be optimistic sooner. I tested the temperature of the hairdryer with my hand, and then grabbed his hair and blew it. My movements were not gentle. "If it hurts, remember to say so." It doesn't hurt." I replaced the thin blanket on the sofa with a thicker one, afraid that she would be cold at night. But when sleeping deeply at night, I always felt a creepy feeling around me, as if a strange gaze was watching me. The murderer who killed the neighbor couple was quickly found. It was the takeout uncle who often delivered meals. In fact, he was the lover of the neighbor aunt. Looking at the hot search on my phone, I was a bit worried about she in the kitchen. After getting along for a few days, She had already taken the initiative to do housework. Obviously, he was much better at cooking than me. I was a bit hesitant, and really didn't know how to start. I couldn't just say, "I saw the hot search about your parents. Don't be so depressed." She saw that I didn't say anything for a long time. He had a pink apron tied around his waist. His distinct knuckled hand was washing fresh vegetables. Nothing. I pretended to be relaxed and touched the plates and bowls. "I just wanted to call you." But obviously, she didn't believe me. He put the washed vegetables aside, turned around and leaned against the sink and looked at me. "If you don't want me to see, then I won't look." He should have guessed it. "You can look, but you have to promise sister to be mentally prepared first." The teenager nodded obediently. I turned my phone towards him, touched the unlock button with my thumb and opened the page. She frowned slightly. The look in his eyes when looking at me became a bit complicated. Something was wrong. "You don't feel anything?" "Not at all." She raised his right hand. His index finger pressed the power button to turn off the screen. His middle finger accidentally touched my index finger. It felt a bit cool. She turned around, picked up the vegetables, cut them with a knife, and his tone carried a hint of unabateable gentleness. "I am still a minor." Looking at the blush on Shu's earlobe, a bad premonition welled up in my heart. I opened my phone. Sure enough, I accidentally cut to the inappropriate page from last night. She finally saw the news. He didn't say a word. His slender figure was swaying on the balcony, hanging up clothes. So capable. I couldn't help but sigh. I was going to go downstairs to restock some supplies so that she and I could eat hot pot at night. When I came back, I found that the teenager was nowhere to be seen at home. My heart skipped a beat. Could it be? I had learned it from my parents that the neighbor couple had rescued she from a group of hooligans. At that time, his ribs were broken, and there was not a single good place on his whole body. The fingers of his right hand were crushed and deformed, but he still tightly protected the medicine he bought for his adoptive mother. Fate was cruel. She's adoptive mother finally passed away due to untimely medication. So, if she wanted to end his life, there could only be one place he would go. I didn't care about anything else and hurried there in my slippers. Fortunately, I had asked one more question. I knew the detailed address of Shu's adoptive mother's house. This was an extremely secluded alley, and from time to time there would be a rotten smell. Under the moonlight, I walked in nervously. The deeper I went, the narrower the alley became, until I heard a scream. I quickened my pace and went towards the sound. The scene in front of me made me hold my breath. The portly man was lying on the ground, and blood was constantly gushing out from his abdomen. The man weakly protected his abdomen with his right hand, but his left hand was being harshly trampled on by a foot. That foot belonged to she. 17-year-old she was against the light, exuding an uncharacteristic gloom for his age. Where should the next cut fall? The teenager's tone was calm, as if asking an extremely ordinary thing. She. I couldn't help but call out. She turned his head and looked at me. There was not the slightest panic in his eyes when being seen by someone. Instead, he just tilted his head and looked at me calmly, just like when I first saw him. Without saying a word, seeing that she had let down his guard, the man on the ground suddenly took out a dagger from his waist. "Be careful." I couldn't stop it in time. The silvered dagger slashed viciously across Shu's arm. Blood gushed out instantly. The man knew he couldn't beat she. After slashing once, he hurriedly escaped. The alley returned to calm, leaving only me and she. He ignored his injured arm. His calm gaze swept over me. Then he turned around and left. I immediately chased after him. "You are injured. Go to the hospital with me." I tried to take him away. She in front of me seemed different from usual. She took out a key from his body, and then inserted it into the keyhole of the dusty lock. No need. With a creaking sound, the wooden door of the courtyard wall was pushed open. The spider web coiled at the corner of the door was torn apart as the door opened. A slight dust rose in the air. I couldn't help but cover my mouth and nose with my hand. She gave me a sidelong glance, walked in, and separated me outside. His sickly white fingers locked the wooden door. His voice was deep. "If you think it's dirty, don't come in." Me? It's not she. I knocked on the door and wanted to explain. "I don't think it's dirty. Also, your wound always needs someone to help deal with it. Right?" For a long time, there was no sound. Wouldn't he have fainted inside? I moved the large stones one by one and piled them up close to the courtyard wall. Then I stepped on them, reached out, and hooked the top of the wall with my right foot. I made it. Just at this moment, she came out from inside. I was climbing on top and happily waved and smiled at him. Yan. This was the first time he called my name. I couldn't see his expression clearly in the darkness. Only heard him say in a low voice, "This wall will fall." Just after he finished speaking, a shaking feeling came. I fell into the courtyard along with some bricks on top and fell in front of she. I sprained my ankle and was hit by several fallen bricks on my calf. I grimaced in pain. She didn't rush to pull me up. Instead, he squatted in front of me, reached out and played with my dusty hair. There was a bit more sarcasm in his eyes, as if admiring my embarrassed appearance. I couldn't help but feel wronged. Tears flowed down unconsciously along with the pain. More and more tears fell drop by drop on the ground. She bent his index finger and slid it along the tear stains on my face all the way to my neck. "What are you crying for?" There was some impatience in his tone. In the darkness, he was completely different from his obedience and gentleness during the day. I didn't know what to say, so I just sniffed, looked up at him, and said in a wronged voice, "I didn't think it was dirty." She was stunned for a moment, but soon returned to normal. He got up, helped me up, and turned to leave. I spoke carefully. "Can you help me go inside? My foot hurts so much." "I will only help you leave." "Forget it." I had thought before I spoke that he wouldn't help. I dragged myself and hopped clumsily inside on one leg. When I entered, she was disinfecting his wound, as if he didn't feel pain at all. When the cotton cloth soaked in iodine was wiped on the wound, there was still no sign of emotional fluctuation on his face. He wrapped the gauze around the wound, circle by circle, and then was about to tie a knot. I sat sulkily on the edge of the bed, with my leg crossed. He didn't help me just now. Don't help him. But looking at his simple wrapping, forget it. I hopped over on one leg, pressed his left hand that was about to tie the knot, wrapped the gauze a few more times to ensure better protection of the wound, then pulled with both hands and tied a bow. Perfect. I was indulging in my beautiful technique, but didn't notice she's burning gaze on my cheek. Yan. The teenager in front of me spoke in a dull tone. "You will regret being nice to me." I deliberately pinched his wound and raised my face firmly. "No." In the alley in midsummer, everything was silent. I had trouble sleeping and tossed, and turned on the hard bed. "Can't sleep?" She, who was lying on another hard bed, lifted his eyelids and his tone was indifferent. "A little." I looked up in response and looked at his injured arm. "Does it still hurt?" "No." She closed his eyes and seemed not to want to deal with these boring questions with me anymore. I shut up embarrassed lie, but couldn't help worrying. "Do you think that person will come back? After all, she hit so hard. Could it be that his leaving at that time was just to find helpers?" "Well, it's hard to say." Still in an indifferent tone. She always seemed not to care about life and death. "But I care." "Then what should we do? Should we run away now? It's better to leave quickly in the dark than to be caught in one net here." She gave me a sidelong glance and his gaze swept over my ankle. "Doesn't it hurt anymore?" At this point, I couldn't care about the pain anymore. I quickly jumped down from the bed and hopped. "It's fine. Actually, it still hurt." She turned over and faced away from me. "Then you go. I'm injured and can't walk. Isn't it just your arm that's injured? Why can't you walk? It doesn't matter. I knew he had no intention of anything else and was fearless of life and death. Forget it. I put on my shoes. Patted my clothes. Anyway, I wanted to live. When I opened the courtyard door, the creaking sound was extremely harsh in the silence. I noticed the room where she was. There was still no sound in the small room under the dim yellow light. It seemed that he really didn't plan to leave. A night in midsummer wasn't so dark. I walked towards the messy grass nearby, and was going to find a handy stick to embolden myself. I lifted my foot and rummaged through the grass. My right foot suddenly touched a soft thing. My body couldn't help trembling. I was a little shuddering. Wouldn't it be some ugly and dirty thing? By the dim light of my mobile phone, I bent down. A white rabbit with blood on its white fur was curled up at my feet. It seemed that its right leg was injured. It couldn't run away, and could only tremble by my feet. It was really pitiful. I sighed and took off my shirt jacket and wrapped it up. Let's go home together. I thought that in such a large place, there would always be a hotel to rest. But what I didn't expect was that not long after I walked, I heard indistinct fighting sounds in the alley. This broken alley. I complained. There are so many things happening in the middle of the night. The scene of the man slashing she with a dagger flashed through my mind. The behavior was resolute and cruel. And she also gave him a cut. If he really came looking for us, then the consequences. Alas. I sighed helplessly. I really can't just leave him to die. Can I? I finally chose to go back. She was sleeping very soundly. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, worrying for nothing. There was still 15 battery left on my phone. I turned on super power saving mode. For the long night. If anything happened, the mobile phone was the last chance to survive. I sat dully on the bed, with she's even breathing in my ears. This guy sleeps soundly by himself. I'm uttered curses and the breathing sound gradually weakened. Won't he die? I quickly got up and stretched out my right hand under his nose. Fortunately, he was still breathing. I took iodine and gauze from the room and tiptoed outside. Under the gardenia tree in the courtyard. I put the rabbit there, thinking that in case of an emergency, it could also survive. But most likely I was overthinking. I took the rabbit out of my coat and carefully looked at its wound. Fortunately, it wasn't very serious. But the rabbit seemed a little flustered and kept kicking me with its other leg trying to run away. There was no way. I had to use some strength to hold it still first. Hey. Don't move. Don't move. I'm applying iodine now. If you move and accidentally touch your wound, don't blame me. Don't worry. I'm not a bad person. I'm just helping you deal with the wound. You are really white. Okay. I'm going to bandage you up. The technique is a bit rough. Don't mind, Mr. Rabbit. How about calling you Herba Eye? Look at how white you are. I put the rabbit at my feet and kept stroking its fur. Maybe it was a little painful because the wound had just been treated. Or maybe it felt that I had no malice. The rabbit at my feet let me do whatever I wanted quietly. I happily rubbed the fur on its back. From now on, you will follow me and live a good life. It doesn't eat spicy food. She's voice came from behind. I looked up. Are you awake? After a faint response. She sat beside me. Yan. You are very noisy. I worked with she to stack up the red bricks that fell with me in the courtyard again. Don't we need mortar? I handed the red bricks to she one by one. He stacked them up layer by layer. No need. I did notice that only a thin layer of mortar was on the top 1/3 of this wall. But the lower part was extremely dense. Obviously, it was deliberately stacked up. But why did they do this? Want to know the reason? She asked what was on my mind. Seeing me nod, he continued. I had an adoptive father who was addicted to gambling and borrowed money everywhere. After borrowing from all the neighbors, he started borrowing from loan sharks. He always thought that one day he would turn things around. As long as he turned things around, Everything he lost in the past could be recovered. Later, the usurious loan grew like a snowball. He couldn't pay it back and was afraid of death. So he thought of another method. He told those people that he had a wife. Later, the debt collectors didn't come during the day but chose late at night. They no longer entered through the front door but secretly climbed over this courtyard wall. In the dead of night, they grabbed the ankle of my adoptive mother with a smile. At this moment, the moonlight shone on Shi's side face. His skin was sickly white. His thin lips were pursed, and messy hair blown by the wind fell on his forehead. Like a vampire in the middle of the night, he took the last red brick in my hand. His cold voice blew into my ears with the wind. So later, my adoptive mother and I came up with this idea. We just simply stack up the wall. So when they come in and fall to the ground and their bodies hit the ground, we will wake up. Then, pick up the knife. Just like what you saw. After she finished the last sentence, he rolled all the emotions in his eyes to the bottom. He looked at me as if waiting for my reaction after hearing this story. So, is this the reason why she doesn't care about life and death? His adoptive mother who depended on him passed away. His biological mother was having an affair. Living in a noisy and restless family all day. Seeing me stunned in place. A trace of disappointment in his eyes quickly disappeared and then sarcasm welled up. He handed the last brick to me. His voice was as cold as before. For the last time. Your chance to leave. I took the brick from his hand and threw it out of the wall with all my strength. She, 17 years old, was half a head taller than me. I stood on tiptoe and pressed down his head hard so that he could barely lean on my shoulder. This is not my chance to leave, but your chance for a new life. The breeze that night gradually cooled down. I vaguely heard she, who was leaning on my shoulder, murmur, "There is no chance. Yan." This was the first hypnosis session that the hypnotist performed on me after I woke up. I had a car accident. When I woke up, 10 years had passed. In this hypnosis, this boy named Shi appeared in my memory. I took him home and accompanied him through a difficult time. 10 years have passed. Now Shi, 27 years old, is sitting beside me. Now he has completely shed the childishness of a teenager. The broken hair on his forehead has been combed up. A high-end custom-made suit shows his elegance. Maybe it was because I hadn't spoken for a long time. My voice was extremely dry. The hoarse and unpleasant voice when I called out. The fingertips slightly holding my hands trembled slightly. Shi's cold voice line contained unstoppable gentleness. Do you remember? I nodded with a smile and stretched out my hand to him just like before. I wanted to hug him. I wanted to thank him. Now Shi is much taller than me. He bent down and hugged me very tightly. I gently patted his tense back and said thank you to him with a smile. Yan. He softly called my name. The words he uttered were irresistible. Don't say thank you to me anymore. In the morning, open the doors and windows. Pick the brightest roses from the garden. Trim them and put them in a vase. Then place it in the most conspicuous place in the living room. She likes roses. This is probably the only thing I can do for him at present. From the initial medical expenses to the treatment that Sen gives me once a week. I simply calculated. The money I owe Shi is probably difficult to pay off in my lifetime. I was fiddling with the roses and thinking about finding a job. What are you thinking about? Shi appeared behind me at some point. He put his arm around my waist and slightly bent down. His lips were close to my left ear bone. This was the posture he would do every day after work. They were as intimate as lovers. Now she has a slim waist. Those long legs are even more deadly. I was a little unnatural, and pushed him away. I'm going to move out tomorrow. Tell me the reason. She, 10 years later, looked at me without any hesitation every time. The burning gaze almost made me blush. I can't always eat and drink for free. You have contributed. He was referring to the red roses on the table. He really knows how to give me credit. That doesn't count. Moreover, I owe you a lot of money. Medical expenses for treatment. Hypnotist fees for Sen. Just calculating it is enough to make me live in debt for the rest of my life. You can move out. Joy climbed onto my brows. Before I could say thank you, she interrupted me. But I have one condition. Okay. Agree without asking? Anything is fine. She couldn't help but chuckle. This was the first time I saw she smile after waking up. It's very beautiful. I repeated. When you smile, it's very beautiful. She reached out and helped me tuck the broken hair by my ear. His tone softened. Condition is. Come back if you can't stand it. No problem. I quickly packed my luggage. In fact, there wasn't much to pack. Before leaving, I was going to say goodbye to she. I pushed open the study. But there was no one there. I placed a bouquet of roses on his desk. But saw a file on the desk. Bye. I murmured the name on the file. It sounded familiar. When I said it, my heart ached a little. She, who had just finished socializing and seemed a bit drunk, walked into the study. He silently closed that file. What's wrong? Nothing. He looked more aggressive at night than during the day. He stared at my red lips. The last kiss fell on my glabella. Yin. Don't leave me. I didn't understand what she meant and was so scared that I ran away quickly. My heart was pounding wildly. In my mind, there was only the memory of seeing she for the first time. Why did he say that? Thinking about it was a bit annoying. I simply stopped thinking about it. I took out my mobile phone, opened the web page, and entered the name Bai. What popped up was Bai's photo. I was instantly stunned. This face was almost exactly the same as she's. Some fragmented memories rushed in. I left hand in hand with Bai. And behind us, she, who was curled up in the closet, stared at our backs as we left. I suddenly opened my eyes. I liked Bai. In the second hypnosis session, I saw Bai in my memory. In my junior year, I participated in a debate competition. He was the second debater on the opposing side. With his excellent ability, he took away the title of best debater that I had always had. Sorry. Looking at my gnashing expression, he smiled with upturned eyes at the corners. I won the award. I was not convinced and secretly competed with him in other competitions later many times. But the results were all unsurprising. As long as he participated in a competition, I would always be second. Don't be angry, Yan. He followed behind me with a careless smile on his lips. He was the eldest young master of the Fu family. With his outstanding facial features and excellent talent, he was a prominent figure in the school. His peach blossom eyes were lazy and careless. The whole person seemed cynical. No one could figure out his character. Just like now, Bai was standing downstairs of the girls' dormitory, setting up cheesy candles, and confessing to me. I knew he wasn't sincere. He just wanted to use this way to block the love interest for him. But my heart still couldn't help pounding wildly. Young Master Fu, can you stop playing? His eyes were. And there was a smile on his lips. Yan. I'm serious. On the day I dragged my suitcase and went home, I saw the police cordon and she sitting slumped against the wall at the door. She was Bai's twin brother. This was a secret he had just told me ago. However, Bai skipped 2 grades in school, so he was in the same grade as me. Looking at the teenager who looked similar to Bai, I couldn't bear it and took him home and tried my best to be nice to him. Sometimes, I couldn't help but lament the unfairness of God. This teenager in front of me clearly had an appearance almost identical to Bai's. But their lives were worlds apart. One was high above, and everywhere he went, he was chased after by thousands of people. And the other was as low as dust, living a life like a rat in the gutter that everyone shouted at. Until I went to that alley. On that sweltering late night, I didn't choose to leave. She told me about his past. Finally, he trembled a little. You will regret being nice to me. I pinched his wound. No. How could I regret it? I thought in my heart. I bought assembled wooden boards online and was going to build a nest for Erba I. She was responsible for building it. I stared at the palette in my hand and pondered. What color do you like? Red. She continued to fiddle with the wooden boards in his hand. Okay. Then red. I squeezed out red dye and picked up a fine-tipped flocked brush and drew a stroke on She's face. She was not angry either. He chuckled and touched it with his hand. The blood-red color was partly stained on his fingertips. A hint of emotion welled up in his eyes. He looked at me with a deep gaze. In the end, the fingertip that wanted to smear the paint on my face fell on the roof of the rabbit's nest, leaving a semicircular mark. Beautiful, he said softly. The doorbell rang. It was Bai. I didn't know where he got my home address. I blocked the door. What are you doing here? What's wrong? Are you hiding a man? With a force, he squeezed into the room. When he saw She, obviously he was also a bit shocked. Then he smiled playfully. What? Do you want to marry both of us brothers? She's movements in his hands paused. I pinched the space between my eyebrows a little helplessly. I didn't want to say too much. But Bai took advantage of my unpreparedness and kissed my right cheek. Did you miss me? Little girlfriend. A blush rose on my earlobes. I pushed him out. When I came back at night, there was no sign of She in the living room. I went into his room and found that he had hidden in the closet. He was twitching all over, as if enduring great pain. She. I called him, but was greeted by his bloodthirsty eyes. Suddenly, he slammed the closet door shut. The sound was like a beast's roar. Go. I didn't leave. I opened the closet, bent down, and hugged him. Something happened to She. It was Bai who told me the news. At that time, I was about to graduate, and was extremely busy with my thesis and job. But I still rushed to She's university immediately. He was sitting alone on the rooftop. At his feet were the just extinguished cigarette butts. When he saw me coming, a light lit up in his eyes. But it quickly went out. I suddenly regretted my recklessness a little. I didn't know how to start. So I just sat there with him. He took off his coat and gave it to me. Are you cold? I waved my hand. Not really. He said that you two are very in love. As long as he says a word, you will come to me. You came. I didn't know how to continue. Suddenly, She approached me. Yan. Should I call you sister-in-law? Time went back to the present. I remembered everything. She and Bai are half-brothers. And the woman who lived as my neighbor was the youngest daughter of the Fu family. She cut off relations with her family for the man named Rong, until she found She, and was about to return to the Fu family. But they died on the day they were about to speak. Later, Bai also died in a car accident. He died on the way to pick me up and take me back to school. When the car skidded and rolled down the mountain, he protected me with all his might. In the end, I survived. But he died on the spot. When I woke up this time, I only felt extremely exhausted. If it weren't for me looking for She, if I had refused his offer to send me, perhaps now, he would still be that lofty teenager. I opened the window to breathe in fresh air. But my sight was attracted by the backyard. This was a very secluded place in the manor. Weeds were growing everywhere, because there was always an untamed beast kept inside. No one dared to approach. The gate was not locked, and I entered extremely smoothly. The deeper I went, the more humid the air became. In the inhaled air, there was a mixture of the musty smell of wooden boards. At the deepest point, there was no sunlight anymore. Approaching, one could hear the slight sound of the iron chain moving. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Inside lay a skinny man. The white shirt on his body had already become tattered. His long hair was scattered casually around his waist. But the man's back was straight as a ramrod. The moment he raised his head, I saw his appearance clearly. It was Bai. Bai wasn't dead. I covered my lips to prevent myself from crying out. But in the silent dark room, any sound would be infinitely amplified. The man chuckled. What trick is this time? Perhaps due to long-term house arrest. His voice was hoarse. The once proud son of heaven was now imprisoned here like a stray dog. According to BAI's proud character. I couldn't imagine why he would rather live a life worse than death and still survive. Seeing that I didn't speak, Bai moved his body, turned around, spread out his hands, and the iron chain locked on his wrist rattled with his movement. I'm already like this. I won't resist. Whether you beat me or kill me is up to you. But I still have only one request. His casual tone suddenly became gentle. Has Miss Yan, who is in a deep sleep in your family, woken up yet? I desperately covered my mouth. Bai, who is now blind. I sat by the side of the road, looking at the traffic. I couldn't figure out why she would imprison him here. Clearly, the Fu family had already set up a tombstone for Bai. Until a drug made me faint. When I woke up, it was a place called a club. This place was a different world from the outside. I was wearing cool clothes and was placed among a group of 17 or 18-year-old girls. A man, a portly man, came over. It was the man who was trampled under Shi's feet 10 years ago. He was holding a cigarette and from time to time touched his bald head. His big eyes sized up these girls. Until he swept his gaze to me and slapped his subordinate beside him. What kind of eyesight? You even catch someone so old? Me. The subordinate bowed. Boss. Don't you think this girl looks like the boss's beloved? If we give her to the boss. Still beloved. Is the substitute literature going to be my turn? How old is this boss? If he is in his 60s. I won't do it. I found it a bit funny until the man called the boss came over. It was as if my heart was torn apart. It was she. His eyes were full of ferocity. His bloodshot eyes were like being filled with blood. He kicked the bald man in the abdomen. Then quickly walked up to me. Put his coat on me. And his eyes were full of distress. Where did they touch you? They call you boss. I looked at she in front of me. He seemed to merge with the 17-year-old teenager from 10 years ago. Under his calm face was a ruthless monster. I remembered Bai once told me that he said, Yan, she is a monster. Don't provoke him anymore. But I didn't believe it. That silent teenager who was bullied by everyone. His nature wasn't bad. But now the facts were right in front of me. Those 17 or 18-year-old girls. At their flower-like ages. Weren't they pitiful? I raised my hand and slapped she hard on the right cheek. He took my slap firmly. In the huge room. It was so quiet that even the sound of a needle dropping could be heard. My palm was a bit numb from slapping. I couldn't help but rub it. Go get some ice. He ordered his subordinate behind him. Then he grabbed my palm and gently applied an ice pack to it. Does it still hurt? I didn't know how to face she next. He promised me to release those girls. But what about next time? And the time after next? Why was he like this? Wasn't the entire Fu family's industry enough? What should I do? I deliberately avoided she. He also understood. He left early in the day and only came back when I was fast asleep at night. Fast asleep. Yes. I slept very soundly every night. She told me that it was because milk had a sleep-inducing effect. There was something wrong with the milk. I poured out the milk at dinner and lay on the bed early. When the moon hung on the branch, a man pressed on me. He kissed my brow. Then my nose tip. My mouth. Finally. It fell on my neck hollow. The scorching breath sprinkled on my skin. Yan. Is it fun to pretend to be asleep? He did it on purpose. I raised my hand and slapped him hard on the face. A red palm print appeared on his face. But he didn't care. He kissed the hand that slapped him. With pleading in his eyes, I looked the same as him. Yan. Do you want to try me? Disgusting. A person like she is indeed easy to disgust. He is like a malicious worm in a dark and stinky ditch. Once stuck to it, it can't be shaken off. When the morning sun shone into the window, he cried again and begged me for forgiveness. Yan. Don't leave me. Okay? Okay. I dragged out the ending sound. Go and close all those things of yours that are not on the table. He lowered his eyes again. Give me some time. She should be on a business trip. I haven't seen him for several days. I secretly sent food to buy. He is too thin. He needs to be replenished. What new trick is your master playing this time? Bai bit off the chicken leg in his hand and chewed slowly without considering his current situation at all. However, it seems that I haven't heard you say much. Are you mute? I tapped the ground twice as a response. Not bad. You are mute and I am blind. Neither of us can take out half a secret. Secret? When I saw that he had been eating for a long time, I handed him the porridge on the side. Thank you. After a bowl of porridge, I wiped the corner of his mouth for him. Bai was stunned and then turned his head to refuse my help. Don't like me. I already have someone I like. I really didn't expect that Bai, who had lived in this place for 8 years, was still so cynical. The movement of wiping the corner of his mouth became a bit harsher. Bai let out a hiss. Little girl, you have quite a lot of strength. Hearing the familiar tone, my eyes became moist. Crying? Just because of this one sentence. You are crying? I wanted to take Bai and escape. I had to gain Shi's trust. So, I continued to live in the manor. While fiddling with the roses in my hand, I collected evidence of Shi's gray industries. In fact, she is very easy to coax. Just need to make mistakes occasionally, and then show that I need him. Shi, help me. I flattered him obediently and watched the love hidden in his eyes deepen more and more. Until at night, his hand reaching out to me became bolder and bolder. Marry me. Yan. That hand made me sick like a flexible snake. Okay. I lied to Shi that I wanted a huge wedding. The whole manor became busy. The bald man came to apologize to me with a gift. Sorry, sister-in-law. Wish you and the boss a long and happy marriage. Well, if you hadn't come in time 10 years ago, I would have been beaten to death by the boss long ago. It was my fault, for not recognizing Mount Tai. Please forgive me and tell the boss not to punish me anymore. So those villains I worried about 10 years ago didn't exist at all. Perhaps from then on, I was wrong. A farmer saved a wolf. But he turned around and ate other lambs. When I found Sen, he had just finished hypnotizing a patient. I was straightforward and proposed that he help me take Bai away. Miss G, why do you think I will help you? He took off his gold-rimmed glasses with amusement and slowly wiped the dust on them. She is much richer than you. I raised a smile and pushed my organ donation document in front of him, but he doesn't have a heart that you want. On the eve of my engagement to Shi, I came to see Bai for the last time. What's this time? I guess there is fish? He guessed right. I placed the chopsticks in his palm. There are too many thorns. You have to feed me. The man leaned lazily against the wall and opened his mouth to me. Probably won't see each other again in the future. I lowered my head, carefully peeled the fish meat and sent it to his mouth. He opened his mouth and spat it out again. Not delicious. His mouth was still so picky. I put the plate aside. Then I pulled over his right hand, spread it out and wrote on it, "Someone will come to pick you up and leave tomorrow night. Eat a little so that you will have strength." Bai withdrew his hand and was silent. I grabbed it again. Miss Yan has woken up. She is fine. Don't worry. The long hair scattered on his forehead covered most of Bai's face. His voice was hoarse. Is someone getting married? I heard that it seems more lively than usual outside. Who is the bride? Miss Yan. My nose was sour and I wrote on his palm. Not bad. Bai was silent for a moment, then stretched out his hand and his tone was light. Give me the food. Little mute. I sat in the bridal chamber, feeling a little uneasy. I didn't know if Bai could escape smoothly. The door was pushed open, and she came in. He drank a little too much tonight, and was full of alcohol. You are drunk. I pushed him. He reached out, and touched my face. His eyes burning. Yan. Why are you just not obedient? I have already let you look for Bai. Why did you secretly let him go? When will you like me so much? My heart was in suspense. Where is Bai? Obviously. The matter has been exposed. She slumped on the edge of the bed. He looked at me, his beautiful eyes full of obsession. Then, he made a shooting action. I desperately suppressed the anger in my heart. What about Sen? That hypnotist shouldn't be implicated. Hug me, and I will tell you. He spread out his arms towards me, hoping that I would hold him in my arms like when we first met. I smiled and slowly approached him. Then, I held a gun against his chest. The man closed his eyes and his arms were still in a spread position. There was a smile on his lips. The pistol in his hand was already loaded. Just a light press was needed. I could avenge Bai. I could free myself. Little darling, don't tremble. She grabbed my hands and moved slightly to the left. There was closer to the heart. He forced me to look directly at him. The devilish voice kept ringing in my ears. The moment he grabbed my hand and pulled the trigger, I saw she trembling with a smile. He said, "So good." The bullet still deviated. She was taken away by his subordinates who broke in. They escaped through an unknown secret passage. But later, news came. On the way of escape, she jumped off a cliff. No body was found. I confessed the location of the club to the police. Those girls were rescued. Along with other big fish that she had traded with also fell into the net one after another. The police told me that Bai committed suicide. He was tightly holding a corner of torn clothes in his hand. I opened it, using blood as ink. There were only 7 short words: "Happy wedding." Little mute. When the matter came to an end, I came to that alley again. Opened the wooden door in the yard. Accompanied by a creak. The spider web at the corner of the door was torn apart. I turned around and locked the wooden door. That gardenia tree was still alive. Under the tree was Erbi Ai's nest. Inside lived little Erba Ai. There was also a paper ball. I opened it. It was Shi's handwriting. Yan. Don't abandon me. Extra chapter Shi. When I was 8 years old, I accidentally learned that I had a half-brother. I was a little happy. I put on the cleanest clothes and sneaked out of the house. Came to my brother's birthday party. There were many good-looking children here. They were all wearing beautiful dresses. I lowered my head and picked at the patch on my pants. I was a little ashamed. My brother was very good-looking. His delicate features and the well-tailored white tuxedo highlighted his elegance. I timidly followed behind him. Watched him cut the cake gracefully and enjoy everyone's pursuit. Watched him call and add. I also followed and carefully called out Dad. But he didn't hear it. Instead, it attracted a group of children to beat me up. They said I was disgusting, and said I was a worm in a dark ditch. I cried and went home and threw myself into my mother's arms. But she beat me like crazy. Scolded me that I deserved it. A bitch has a bitch's life. But my life was clearly exchanged by her. I am the real eldest young master of the Fu family. From then on, I began to grow like a wild grass by myself. At the age of 14, I looked more and more like my biological parents. My adoptive mother tied me to the bed. She said she wanted to play a game with me. But first she had to take off all my clothes to check if I had hidden anything. Looking at her eyes glowing green, I felt so disgusted. She didn't know that those things couldn't tie me up at all. So the weak her was locked in the corner by me instead. With a dog chain. I told everyone that she was sick. That pack of medicine that didn't save her in time was just a pack of drugs. The days of licking swill in the trash can were not as good as this kind of life where you could get a lot of money just by running errands. I was finally taken back home by my biological parents. My mother, who always loved my father like her life, slapped my father. But the look in her eyes when she looked at me clearly also had unconcealable disgust. Oh, maybe I didn't grow up to their satisfaction. How excellent can a child growing up in a wild dog's den be? But it doesn't matter. It's just a bit noisy. I think so. And that girl next door is a bit annoying. I can't remember what she looked like until that night. The second in command who always did things neatly made a mistake. When I stabbed him, I was seen by her. The second in command was worthy of being the second in command. He got up and gave me a cut. Fortunately, it didn't hurt. It's just that I am a little tired. This kind of life is meaningless. I lay on the hard bedboard and thought about how much sleeping pills I needed to take at one time so that I wouldn't wake up. But that girl was really a bit noisy. Until I opened the door. I saw her stumbling and climbing over the courtyard wall of my house. Like a beam of light shining into my dark life. I also thought about getting out of those dirty lives. But once that kind of thing is involved, it's like a beast in the dark with a big mouth open. If you are not careful, you will be swallowed. My biological mother was killed by my biological father. He was afraid that my biological mother would tell Mr. Fu about his lover. But he didn't expect that he was accidentally killed while killing. That takeout guy was just unlucky. But no one cares. A person like an ant. Life and death are jokes of others. Mr. Fu still knew BAI's identity. The son of a son-in-law's lover. What a dirty identity. But he was in such a high position, and always had to put on an act. On the surface, he still loved his grandson. But secretly he tampered with the car he often used. There was Yan in that car. This was the only thing I cared about. Yan had an accident. She was in a coma for a long time. I didn't want to save him. But I was afraid that my Yan would blame herself. So, I simply imprisoned him in the backyard. A person who would never come out naturally wouldn't be harmed by Mr. Fu again. However, it seemed that Yan had misunderstood me. That's fine too. As long as she doesn't leave me. Anything is fine. In front of me is a cliff. I don't want to run anymore. I'm a bit tired. It should have been like this 10 years ago. Perhaps jumping down like this is also a happy thing. So good. I will be liberated soon. I have wanted to close my eyes for a long time. When I close my eyes, I can see Yin at 19 years old. She is still climbing on the red brick wall. With a bright smile on her face. She said copious lie to me. She helped me.